Hello! Today's video will be dedicated to Caro-Kann defense and exactly to the exchange variation of Caro-Kann. And we will look at it using my blitz game as an example. Since this game was blitz, there were many mistakes on both sides, me and my opponents, but still the main lines of the exchange Caro-Kann can be clearly seen there. That's why I want to show you this game. But before we go to Caro-Kann, I am excited to invite you to my course. I named it Chess Hands-On Openings for Blitz. I left the link here in the description. Just 3 hours, just 10 lessons, and you're totally prepared for Blitz for all occasions on the board. So, the Caro-Kann defense, e4, c6, d4, d5. Both sides claim the center. Knight c3, and black captures on e4, thus defining the exchange variation direction. Knight e4, and here my opponent made a strange move, h6, which is not quite theoretical, but in general it turns out to be a transposition of moves, since this move is still present in exchange variation main line. Knight f3, according to this theory, the bishop usually develops to f5 immediately without this h6, but again, this is just a transposition. Knight g3, and here of course my opponent should have retreated not to g6, as in the main line, where there is no pawn on h6 yet, but since he already played h6, it would have been logical to hide the bishop on h7 right away, because in the exchange variation the bishop is usually chased anyway by pawns. However, my opponent played bishop g6, perhaps deciding to test me if I move pawns. I continue in standard fashion with h4. This is also a main move in exchange variation of Caro-Kann. In the main line at this point, black would usually play this h6 to give the bishop an escape square and prevent it from being trapped by h5. Black develops, I push h5, and the bishop logically retreats to its little window on h7. Next comes bishop d3, a good opportunity to trade this black bishop that came from c8 to f5 and then spent 2 moves to move from g6 to h7 for our bishop that had just entered the game and made only one move. We trade bishops, and the queen also gets nicely activated toward the center as a result of this trade. Black continues with e6, developing and preparing to bring out the light squared bishop. I develop my own bishop to f4. Black also places his bishop symmetrically for exchange logical symmetrical play. And here it is important not to rush to trade your active bishop for black's bishop, bringing the opponent queen into play as black did. There is a good opportunity, which almost always exists in this line, to plant the knight on e5. This nail knight e5 is one of the main strategic ideas of the Caro-Kann exchange variation. It is supported by the bishop and the pawn standing strongly in the center, a very powerful knight. Black should have castled quickly to remove the king from the center. That would have been a good move. Instead, black played knight d7, wanting to put pressure on the central knight immediately. And here, let's take a pause and think about tactics. Yes, there is already a tactical idea here, quite common one in Caro-Kann line. White can immediately play knight f7. You should always watch out for these knight f7 blows in Caro-Kann exchange variation. In this case, the bishop on d6 is hanging. We capture the pawn with the tempo attacking the queen have to move, or black should capture, and then we simply win a piece in return. As a result, white just wins the clean pawn on f7, the queen on g6 also exerts strong pressure, the position is absolutely won. That was simple tactic which I somehow missed, even though I've been playing this exchange Caro-Kann with white many years. Instead, I castled long. In the Caro-Kann, you can always castle long, bringing the rook on the d file, putting the pressure in the center. Black noticed this tactical motif and hurried to defend this f7 pawn with queen e7. But black also had a tactical idea here. Let's pause again and find it for black now. Yes, it's queen a5, a double attack, attacking the pawn on a2 and the central knight on e5, because now there are 3 attacks on the knight and only 2 defense. Right. With this double attack, black could have simply won a pawn. White would have had to defend this a2 pawn, and black could have captured the knight. And now, knight take f7 tactic would no longer work because the queen has moved away from the danger, and the white bishop would be captured with check, after which the knight would also be taken back. The moment would be gone. There would be no longer knight f7 blow, since the king is safely castled and the bishop checked interferes. But black didn't find this and played defensively queen e7, supporting f7 and removing the queen from d file. I played rook e1, and that's definitely a good move. The rook stands perfectly in the open file, no question about it. Now all white's pieces are centralized, the knight on e5 is solidly supported, white has a pleasant position. Black played knight d5 attacking the bishop, the only retreat is of course bishop d2, which had already been prepared for it, the square. Now the knight on e5 is defended by both the pawn and the rook. I brought just in time, instead of the bishop. Black trades knights. I capture with a tempo, attacking the bishop. The black bishop retreats. It would have been logical for it to retreat to c7. We're safe and keeps pressure on c5, on e5, sorry, maybe later jumping on b6. The bishop would stand well on c7, but instead black played bishop c5, where it's somewhat hanging, but attacking f2 pawn on the other hand. I played knight e4, defending the pawn and attacking the bishop. The bishop is protected by the queen, but still it's always tempting to trade the knight for the strong bishop. Black castles, deciding not to move bishop again, but instead attacks my queen along the e-file with the rook. I trade bishop to avoid this powerful attacking bishop on f2 weakness, and the black queen becomes active instead, pressuring f2 again. My queen is now under the threat along the file, so I retreat. A good square for the queen would be g3 to target g7 and to defend f2. Also, of course, it's not simple. There is rook g8. One would need to calculate carefully, not immediately taken. Still, queen g3 would have been a strong move, reinforce f2. But I decided to defend the pawn differently. I played queen f3, attacking f7. Black replied with queen e7, defending the pawn, but stepping away from the center. It looked rather passive. Better would have been rook d7, preparing the doubling rooks. Since the queen moved away, I now have an opportunity for active move c4, which is typical in the Caro-Kann again, chasing the knight from d5. No need to fear that it's from the side of the king. After knight b6, for example, I could have reinforced the pawn with b3, not fearing of these light square weaknesses, since we have a dark squared bishop and black doesn't. Instead, I played queen c3, to which black responded with c5, again putting pressure on f2 pawn, which I left undefended by my moving queen away, here and there, back and forth. Now bishop e3 suggests itself. Black captures the pawn, trade follows, and white takes on a7, regaining material. It may seem that the bishop could be trapped on e7 after b6, but it can take a moment and check why. Of course, because we can chase away the black knight defending b6, forcing black to give up the pawn. My opponent chose to trade pieces, going king b7 to catch the bishop. We capture the knight, black captures the bishop, and we reach the rook and game. It seems roughly equal in pawns, but white position is slightly more active, thanks to these Caro-Kann nails on e5 and h5, or beaver claws if you like, which were pushed early on and control lots of space. You can build your play around them, placing pieces on d6, for example. The pawns are strong, the white's endgame is better, and it comes down to a pure pawn ending. White will definitely have an advantage due to these far advanced pawns. I placed the rook to d6, as promised, using the e5 pawn to support the d6 square. Black brings the king closer, defense c6, doubling the rooks, always a good idea on the open file to double rooks, and eventually exchanges comes. Now the rook is supported by the pawn. Black's king approach is planning to undermine my pawn with f6. I advance my king, and here black offers a rook trade, but that's a mistake. As I mentioned, the pawn endgame is better for white because of the strong e5 and h5 pawns. Much better for black would have been to swing the rook on a file and attack the a pawn, having their own decent counterplay. But instead, fearing my central rook too much, they exchanged rooks, and I happily went to the pawn endgame. By the way, this is quite common in exchange Caro-Kann variation, many games, and in such pawn structures. I step the king back on one square, and there are my nails, h5 and a5, my main hope to the endgame. The c and a pawns are look discounted, but a pawn is a good candidate for a distant passed pawn, ready too much forward, so there is a good hope for the endgame. Both kings move forward. At first it's not clear where exactly my king is heading, but c5 doesn't look great for black, even though it straightens their pawn chain. The holes on b5 look fatal. The plan is clear, bring the king to b5 now and push the a pawn. I should have gone king c3 right away and rushed to b5. The road was obvious, but it was blitz and time was short, so I went king e4, lost in a few tempos. Black could have tried g6 preparing f6, but instead they closed the position on the king side. Not great, since the queen side white clearly gets there faster. King c3, black played king e7 for some reason, maybe planning to break through the g file. But it was too late. My king got a tempo and arrived faster to the queen side. We go toward our target square b5. Black tries to stop. King d7, king a4, king c6. They block us, but now it's a battle of tempo. Both sides running out of moves. I play g3, and it's clear black has no useful moves left. Any move gives up the b5 key square. It's Zugzwang. After king b7, king b5, white has reached the dream square. Black can only shuffle the king around while gradually drive it back. After king c7, we still have a tempo a4, black returns, and now we find the winning move. Of course, it's correct, a5. We trade, and once again black runs off space. After king c6, we occupy the opposition, forcing the black king back. They must give up the 6th rank. The pawn on c5 falls, and the position is lost. You see? Here we watch one of my Caro-Kann blitz games, which is really went classical way. And see you on my course. The link in the description. We will cover Caro-Kann and much more.